10, you want to take roll call?
Mayor Horn,
Here.
Alderman Kittle,
Here.
Lindell, Montello,
Here.
Volkert,
Here.
Weinmeier,
Here.
Sikowski.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adoption of agenda.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Public comments. Is there anybody wish to make a public comment at this time? See nobody coming up. Item 6, consent agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second to that?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. There's no old business, new business. Plan Commission recommendation, certified survey map, 1930 Business Highway 64.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Plan Commission reviewed this application at their last meeting. This is a certified survey map from Halley Builders. I think everyone's fairly familiar with the location. This is County Road K. This is First Lutheran Church and the golf course. The property here is highlighted with a red border. The applicant is seeking to divide a 55-acre parcel into 2 lots. Basically, they're just looking to split the existing house into a separate parcel so that they could sell the existing house separate from the remaining property. Included in your packets and shown on the screen was the certified survey map that was submitted by the applicant. There are a few revisions that they need to make at this time. Their surveyor is currently working on those. The couple items to note, they have to include a drainage and utility easement. They also have to include the parent parcel. So they have to include the certified survey map has to include the full 55 acres. So the Plan Commission recommended approval of the CSM subject to the 5 conditions noted on the screen and in your packet. That includes identifying the building setbacks for Lot 1, including noting on the certified survey map that in the future, if city water and sewer were ever extended out that way, that the private well and septic would have to be abandoned. All the utility issues are subject to review and approval by the Public Works Director. The drainage and utility easement condition, which I noted earlier, and then also just including that original parent parcel. The surveyor already has received this information prior to the Plan Commission meeting, and basically we would have a clean certified survey map prior to it being recorded with St. Croix County.
Questions from anybody?
No, the other acreage that's there, that's all city property?
Yes, it's all currently in the city. And no plans at this time for development. They've been marketing it for some time. They are looking to list the, I believe the house has been listed now for sale.
And there's currently a driveway there for that one singular house?
Yes, it currently has a driveway already. Yep.
264?
Correct.
Yeah, to 64, yeah. Yeah, you can see currently they show it here on the CSM.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the certified survey map as presented with the 5 conditions.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second to approve the CSM for 1930 Business Highway 64. Is there any discussion?
Is that's 1930 Highway 64?
Correct?
Business Highway 60.
Business Highway 64.
Business, okay.
Yep. So this is, the house is just south of the lakes on the south side of the road. And this is where the asbestos, I presume as they're trying to sell this house, I presume that has to be disclosed as well. That's the address on the property. Yes. Correct. Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Sikowski.
Yes.
Volkert,
Yes.
Kittle,
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Weinmeier,
Yes.
Item 8.2 is the Park Board Citizen Appointment, Krista Miller.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion that we approve the appointing Krista Miller to the Park Board.
Second?
Motion and a second to appoint Krista Miller. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Kittle,
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Weinmeier,
Yes.
Zakowski.
Yes.
Item 8.3, naming of park.
This item is regards to the park that's being developed in the Whispering Prairie subdivision, east of eastern city limits out in the Whispering Prairie development. This went to the park board at their last meeting to choose a name for the new park. They recommend Whispering Prairie Park, keeping it pretty simple, similar to the name of the development.
So just out of curiosity, how much time did they spend debating that?
45 minutes, if you want to know.
Well, let me help you out.
Long deliberation.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the park board's recommendation to name the park Whispering Prairie Park.
Is there, so there's a motion to name the
Second.
Whispering Prairie Park, and there is a second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Weinmeier.
Yes.
Zakowski.
Yes.
Volkert.
Yes.
Civic Center remodel update.
Mayor and Council, we, as you know, had talked a few months ago now about kind of a conceptual plan that staff had developed for potential remodel of the Civic Center. At that time, we had met with some contractors. We kind of looked into our options moving forward, kind of from a statutory standpoint, and kind of arrived at the conclusion that based on what we're proposing to do, a design build or a working directly with a contractor was not going to be acceptable from a statutory standpoint. In other words, what we're proposing is going to be public construction, which the state requires us to publicly bid for anything over $25,000. So with that in mind, in order to kind of move this project forward, we need to develop or have an architect help with developing a bid set that we can put out that contractors can then bid on, similar to what we do for street reconstruction and those types of things. So it does make the process a little bit more complicated than what we had hoped, but based on kind of the guidance that we got from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, it is what it is. So what we had done, in addition to talking with some construction contractors to get some ideas on the kind of estimated cost, also talked with some designers, architects that we could potentially work with, and kind of broke the scope of the project into several potential phases or alternates. So the scope that we had looked at includes kind of these, and I've numbered them in the order that I put in the memo of priority. So remodeling the existing building and zoning and municipal court areas to house all customer service personnel. So we talked about that kind of being the customer service area, and then moving the municipal court personnel to the existing South Conference Room area kind of across the hall from the mayor. Some soundproofing in the west area of the building and security doors to kind of close off access to what now is the utility office. Essentially, that would all be staff area back there. And remodeling the receptionist workstation, remodeling restrooms in the main lobby, and then potentially looking at this hallway just on the other side of this wall, and potentially remodeling that. And so again, you know, kind of the order of priority of those pieces of it. In talking with the architects, kind of the proposals that we got back were between $25,000 and $30,000 to get us to that, you know, when we have the bids in hand. And the way that I had you know, kind of discussed it with them was to have the bid set up as a series of alternates so that we can select, you know, the council can select, okay, up to a certain amount that we could, you know, once we have the firm numbers in hand, we could say, okay, we're going to do phases 1 through 3 of this, and that hits our budget number, and we're going to not do the remaining items. So that's kind of the theory with the way we were going to approach the bidding. And so really, as it says here, kind of what we'd like is for the council to look at that list of alternates and their priority. Do we have things in the right order? Are there things on that list that we know we don't want to include? And then, you know, once that's established, this would kind of be the next step, would be to authorize staff to spend that design money to get us to the point where we have those bids and could take it to construction. And once we, you know, have that, we can bring back that timeline and what those next steps would be as far as bidding and construction and those types of things.
Jeremiah, two quick questions for you. It says, this paragraph right above recommendation, staff is planning to move forward with security improvements, fire alarm, security cameras, security measures for the lower level. So independent of this, we're looking at putting some gates up and some
Correct.
cameras. Okay, so
Yep.
that's independent of this. It would be super helpful for me if, even if it was just what we'd call kind of a simple drawing, because I'm not asking you to do this right now, but like item number 1, remodel the existing building, zoning, and municipal court areas to house all customer service personnel. I cannot think I know what that, but just, this is what we're kind of thinking
Yeah.
that would look like. It'd be great if I could just see kind of a picture of what you have in mind so I understand it. But, Mr. Mayor, I want to offer a
Before you, if I can interject.
Sure.
When we, ballpark, what are you thinking now, what this is going to cost?
So in talking with contractors, you know, through this full scope, they had that in the, you know, $250,000 to $300,000 range, and I think Mike had sent that update out to the council a while ago. I think, you know, part of the reason for that number seems high, and I think part of the reason for that is a lot of, you know, what they're putting together for a cost estimate right now is based on a lot of unknowns. You know, when we start talking about remodeling bathrooms, okay, that could vary from, you know, replacing fixtures to, okay, if we have to start moving block walls around and they look and see that there's a bank of HVAC ducts that abut those, you know, money gets put in to account for those unknowns. So that's the, you know, kind of the estimate that we've gotten. I think, again, that's elevated just because of the uncertainty associated with the project.
Yeah, so then with the 30,000, we're now talking about 330,000? Possible?
Possibly, yep.
Yeah,
And
so-
again, I think as we get into that design, you know, and those variables get answered, and obviously knowing that, okay, this is not the direction that we want this budget to go, I think, you know.
Yeah. And for me, so we bid at the apple because when we first started talking about this, about trying to create some efficiencies, we're about the $50,000 range. So now we're talking $330,000. I mean, this is why people start, you know, in the name of efficiency, we're not going to create one more square foot of space. We're not going to create one more desk for an employee. I mean, you guys do a great job, so this is not against you, so don't take it that way. I'm just, it's the taxpayers, $330,000 to make City Hall more efficient. They're going to start throwing us out. We're nuts if we go down this path. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree. The one thing I think is that the city council should be involved right along the way, not after the fact, you know, approving things. And then we're going to get rid of the 2 south meeting rooms. We don't need, how are they going to be replaced, those 2 meeting rooms? I mean, stuff like that, I think we have to get more answers. Like Fred said before, we spent $330,000. And I think we need some answers. And I think we have to be involved in a lot of these decisions going along. Because like Fred said, people are going to look at this and say, what's going up from 50 to 330?
But
Again,
in
and this is-
all due respect, we're not looking to spend $330,000 right now. We're trying to answer the question as to what these projects might cost. So really, the commitment today is for $30,000 to come back with a solid design plan, and it's more than that. It's bids, and it's really breaking it down. I appreciate the fact that we're taking, and I'm sorry, these 6 areas, and we're going to put a price tag to each one of those, and then we get to decide, don't want to do that, do want to do that, because some things should happen here. And in all due respect, Mayor, valid comment, but we're not talking about doing the whole thing. We're talking about, and I think relative to the question, which is, okay, staff says this is our order 1 through 6. If you have a different order, tell us what it is. What do you want to spend money on, what don't? So I think sitting here, it would be really easy to say, we're not spending $330,000 on this building. Just to say that, okay? But we don't, there are certain things in there that should be done. And I think one of the comments, which actually isn't even part of this, I don't think, but the upgrades needed to this room to facilitate better sound.
Totally agree.
Council meetings. So really, in my mind,
Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that this is really giving them the okay to have better information so we can make a better decision about what direction we want to go.
Well, but, go ahead. What the mayor is saying, and what I'm thinking, and what I think maybe Jim is thinking is, it's going to cost us $30,000 just to figure out if we do or don't want to do that in the first place. So what we're saying is if we are pretty universal on that we might not want to do this, and it's pretty good the way it is, and there's some fixes that we need to do.
What are those fixes?
What are those fixes?
Exactly.
But I don't know that we need a $30,000 person to figure out that we can spend $10,000 or $12,000 here, or get a better sound system, or all those kind of smaller things.
Maybe the 30,000 is going to fix the stuff that absolutely needs to be fixed, and we don't do the rest of it, you know? I think we need more time, to be honest. And whether you want to spend the time now to go through these 6 items, what are the items that absolutely should be done? And let's cross the rest off the list.
There's a few.
Or we can table this and bring it back at the work session.
Well, I think it should go to a work session, and each one of those areas tell us why and how it can be more efficient. I think that's what we have to find out. If we're going to spend money, we have to know everything about the reason for all 6 of those.
Well, I think it's a good idea to put customer service where the customers normally are, and everyone else in a different area. I think that's a great idea.
It sounds like what y'all want to see happen is to have more information, let's just say on each of these 6 items, and then if you want to take something off the list, or take something off the list, if there are a couple of items on there, without getting into the weeds right now, that we want to do, then we could authorize the investigation as to the financial ability to do those specific things. Am I hearing, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, there's some items that we need to do. I'm
Sure.
not disagreeing with you on that. I think it's that total price tag. I don't know if many of the aldermen are willing to bite at the apple of, we're not going to do $330,000 worth of work.
So
We're gonna do
Jeremiah,
something.
would it be possible to do just a little bit of expanding, and again, maybe with some simple drawings, and just to have a concept for if those 6 are the right things to look at?
Yeah.
And that when we meet again, then we could kind of look at, and we could have then a general discussion about, okay, yes, no, yes, you know what I'm saying? And then we could maybe narrow our scope to what we consider to be the most crucial of those things on
And
the
if you
list.
can do a ballpark, I think we're not going to hold you to it. I think item 5 is going to cost, X. Without, you have the freedom to come up with your best guess.
Yeah.
And it's no harm on you if you're wrong on it.
Yeah, and I can put something together and send it out, and maybe, in going into the work session, if the council, has the opportunity to kind of give that some thought, are there any things on here that are, on this list that are must-haves? Are there any things on this list that are must-not-haves? I think that would be, that would kind of help to further that discussion.
And I think the
in that
best way
meeting
to
as well.
answer that, if we had more information,
Yep.
again, simple drawings, whatever, and then, to me, at the work session, then we could answer those questions then, saying, okay, you got 6 items, take these, I'm making
Yeah.
it up, take these 4 off,
Yep.
these 2 we want to focus on, and then we could put our efforts on those.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, not everything has to be done this year. That's the whole thing. Like you said, we do it in phases even.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So is there a motion to table this to the work session?
I'll make that motion.
The motion to table to the work session, is there a second to the motion? There's a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Weinmeier? Yes. Zakowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Item 8.5, the 2019 financing for capital projects.
Mayor and council, in your packet, and as part of the adopted 2019 capital budget, we had planned for roughly a borrowing issuance of $642,000. However, hold on, we're just trying to get to the right slides here. Okay. However, when we are looking at a budget and when we have actual expenditures come on in, there's several things that impact where the exact dollar amount lies at. And some of that includes project timing, as well as various funding sources. So as I said, the adopted capital budget anticipated financing of $641,000. Actual financing requirements for 2019 are just under $470,000 at $466,447. What that financing supports is some vehicle replacements, equipment replacements, some park improvements, as well as design costs associated with some trail projects that we have grant funding associated with, and software and technology upgrades and improvements. The details of those projects are in the packet in front of you tonight. And when we look at what the financing options are available in order to facilitate that, we look at the state trust fund loan kind of as the benchmark for an interest rate. And then we have some local financing where we could go to a local promissory note type of issuance. So the state trust fund loan currently for a 6 to 10 year note is at 3.25%. At this juncture, we're recommending going to a local bid as we anticipate we'd be able to achieve better interest rates. We've been in consultation with Ellers, who's our financial advisor as well, and they feel that the ranges that they've been seeing are anywhere between 2.75 and 3%. So we would anticipate that we would do better than the straight trust fund loan. If we don't and those bids come back, we always have the option to move to a state trust fund loan. What the impact looks like and how we've amortized the issuance on this would be an issuance of $470,000. That would include $3,000 in costs associated with Ellers assisting with the legal and compliance aspect of the bid. Amortized over 6 years, that would result in a GO debt outstanding at the end of December of just under $16 million at $15,879,890. If it's approved to move forward with the solicitation of bids tonight, we would issue that bid issuance, allow that for about 2 weeks, and then we'd bring the results back to the November 11th regular council meeting to look for approval to move forward, and we would anticipate funding to occur at the end of November.
I'll make a motion that we solicit for competitive bids with Ellers assistance.
All right, there's a motion to have staff move forward with the solicitation of competitive bids. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Chief, the squad cars that are listed on here,
Yes.
those are new squad cars?
Those are I believe those were the two
Yes.
that were, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, the ones that we've been waiting for. One has been delivered and we're waiting on the second.
one.
It should hopefully be coming in soon.
Those are bids from a while ago.
Correct.
Correct.
Any other discussion?
Well, okay, so we just decided we weren't necessarily going to spend $30,000 on facility, and that's part of this.
So the one
Good point.
piece that's on there, and I think to clarify, so there was funds that were attributable to the reconfiguration of the Civic Center, and then there were some for technology improvements. So what's included in here would be the technology improvements for the council room chambers, which would help with amplification,
Okay.
sound deadening, some enhancements to visual.
So the $30,000 on the whole reconfiguration is not part of this?
Correct.
All right.
So this piece of it, Mike, is just in regards to addressing the technical deficiencies within this room, as well as just the quality of visuals and things of that nature. So we've been in conversations with a couple. We'd come back and have this as a formal kind of bid process, but we anticipate and kind of to move this forward, that $40,000 mark would get us to the point where we address all of those deficiencies within this area.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I see budgeted cost and actual cost is zero. So it says Civic Center improvements, $30,000 budgeted cost, but actual cost is zero.
Yep, because that's the project that we were just talking about, so we wouldn't be funding that in this 2019 financing. It would move to a 2020 project piece.
Does that answer all your questions, Mike?
That's money we already spent.
All right.
What's the cost of Ellers?
3,000.
3,000, okay.
That's why the issuance is at 470,000, so just slightly under
Okay,
3.
thank you.
Any other questions? Call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier? Zakowski?
Yes.
Volkert?
Yes.
Kittle?
Yes.
Montello?
Yes.
Then item 8.6, the Canadian National Railroad Project Update.
Mayor Hurd and Council just wanted to give a brief update on the Canadian National Project. We had a community discussion last week at WITC, attended by about 75 people. A few of you were in attendance at that. Really where we're at in the process right now is working with Canadian National to mitigate some of the issues that we've heard from residents, as well as get answers to some of the questions that we received last week. Included shown on the screen is their proposed site plan. At this time, they anticipate beginning construction in November of this year. So they are in the process of getting bids from local contractors for some of the grading work. With that, I guess if Nick had any comments, otherwise if there's any questions, but just an informational update for the council tonight.
Yeah, I'd add a couple of things. We've been meeting regularly, city, town, staff, and the lawyer who's been retained to represent both the city and town, Kathy Chung. She has put together her analysis of what it would look like to file a petition with the Surface Transportation Board in an effort to stop this project. We've not brought that to you yet because the alternative is to work with the railroad in an effort to try to mitigate the adverse impacts, as Noah said, through a voluntary and cooperative agreement, which would be binding on the railroad in the form of a development agreement. I'm taking the lead on drafting that development agreement, and it contains a number of different provisions which address those impacts like noise, lighting, air pollution, visual impacts, and a whole host of other issues. So really the next step in the process is providing that development agreement to the town so that they can get a look at it, and then submitting it to the railroad to see where we can't gain voluntary cooperation. There is always available as a potential option the filing of the petition with the Surface Transportation Board, which is a regulatory body in Washington, D.C. That deals with siting issues. And so, as we know, challenging a railroad siting project is difficult. There's a reason that railroads run across this country, and it's in part to ensure they're protected by interstate commerce and the right to do business across states. And if every locality had the opportunity to object to a railway project, there'd be no way that we'd have a railway transportation system running centrally through the country. So we understand that the landscape and the framework. I think the town does too. We did have a very good discussion at the community conversation with lots of questions, that most of which were anticipated by city staff, some of which were new. But I think we have a handle on the entire process and what the residents are concerned about. The town is going to be asked by the railroad to reroute 105th. That's an issue that will be decided by the town itself. as to whether that road will be relocated. So they will be addressing that piece of it. And then there are some other things that get addressed by the DNR, including wetlands and drainage and all the environmental issues. So it's a major undertaking in terms of making sure that everything is addressed. The city is taking a leading role in particular with the way that and the experience that we've had in dealing with past projects like ICE and like a few of the other larger scale projects. From our perspective, this is more of a land use matter than anything else that we need to address with the cooperation, hopefully, of the railroad to mitigate impacts on our residents. So that's how we're treating it. Then the last thing I would say is that we're trying to coordinate with the county as well, this being a project in the town. It's really town and county jurisdiction as opposed to city jurisdiction, but it will certainly have impact on city residents, which is why we're taking a leading role in providing assistance. That being said, the county has its own set of considerations as well. So it's our hope that when we get to a development agreement, that development agreement will be an agreement between the town, the county, the city, the town, and the railroad. So that's the direction we're headed. There's really, as Noah said, no action to take, but we're trying to do our part to minimize the impacts of this project on the residents of the city.
It's interesting, and I understand the part about railroads since in the last 150, 60, 70 years, having the authority that they've had. Although this is interesting, that has nothing to do with, specific siting of railway, that type of thing. This is just a commerce that the railroad participates in. And this does, based on the feedback that I heard of the public discussion that they had, it gives rise to where the origination of the phrase "being railroaded" came from. So that was the feeling that was expressed to me. So I'm obviously encourage the efforts to do whatever we can to mitigate something that I think a person would be pretty hard pressed to say folks who live in this area are excited to see, in a good way, see going there.
Yeah, I don't
far
see
as-
any
oh,
benefit.
sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
As far as the litigation goes, do we really have time to, from what I've heard, their plans are fairly quickly?
Well, their plans, from what we've been told, their plans are to close on the property. They've exercised their option to purchase both this property and the piece that's to the north of Old 64. Business 64. So they told us that they intended to close on the purchase before the end of October, and that they intended to begin earthwork in the first week of November. We do know that they have sent bids out to local contractors. We've received notice from some contractors that received those requests for bids. Whether or not they start in the first week of November, that will be based on their timeline. But in terms of operating, they don't plan to start operating until June or July of next year. Okay. And there's a building that's proposed in the southern part of the property for their employees. I don't suspect that they're going to get blacktopping down for the parking lot this year, given the time of year. And so the reality is that if we can't come to an agreement on some mitigation measures, certainly there is time to file a petition. Okay. That being said, they are encouraging us to have as much dialogue with them as we can, and specific on the mitigation measures as soon as possible, because they want to build those mitigation measures into their plans. I can tell you that I've asked for a grading plan, and they don't have one completed yet. I've asked for a lighting plan, and they've said they don't have it completed yet. And so this is where I talk about this being addressed as a land use project. These are all typical and common plans that we would ask for any development of any commercial operation, and they don't have them done yet. So from my perspective, there is an opportunity to work with them on mitigation efforts, I think like any commercial project, they probably have a budget, and we've been told that, you know, it's a matter of dollars and cents, and if we want excess berming, well, there may not be dollars for additional mitigation measures. And so it's one of those where we really need to get the proposal to them, so that they can then come back with a response. We've also been told that this is far more dialogue than they have on most of their projects. So, you know, to Alderman Montello's point, I think generally that the railroad comes in and dictates exactly what's going to happen with their facility. Here, to the credit of the town, credit of the city staff, there has been a pretty open dialogue with the railroad, the results of which will remain to be seen, right? I mean, we have to see, they've told us that they oriented the site plan with screening in mind, with the ponding on the northwestern corner in mind. But, you know, we still have to see where the berms are going to go, where trees are going to go, what their fencing is going to look like, what their lights are going to look like. You know, certainly the folks that live in the town are concerned that this is going to look like Walmart in terms of that lighting and just that beacon of light. And so there are lots of things that need to be mitigated, and hopefully we can get to a point of a reasonable agreement with the railroad.
And I'm presuming you're also going to be talking about transportation with 40 semis coming and going, what the impact is going to be on Business 64.
Correct. Yeah, they've been very clear that their only concern with respect to access is to Highway 64. I mean, they're going to Highway 64 and then they're going into the Twin Cities. And so there is a concern about trucks accessing in and out. There's a concern going over that bridge and turning onto the exit ramp. And so those are all things that have to be reviewed and you know, hopefully we can mitigate as well as possible.
Anybody, any questions or any other comments from anybody?
One other comment I was just going to make was we do have a copy of the slides that were shown at the public meeting last week. We'll be putting those on the city website, as well as a copy of the traffic impact analysis that they provided. We'll look to see if the town, have spoken to the town of Richmond. They've been having some website issues with theirs, but we do want to make that information available to the public to look through the traffic impact analysis, and especially if they weren't able to make the meeting last week, to look through the presentation slides. So those will be on the city website later this week.
And I want to point out, so no, I think you did a very good job that night. Gary Knutson did a very good job with running that meeting, keeping it orderly, answering questions. You know, the comments and stuff that you guys added, I think were very helpful. Kind of a trying situation for the community, obviously that's affecting a lot of the township residents over there, but there are a lot of city residents that are going to be impacted by this as well. So kudos to you guys for doing a good job in that meeting.
Thank you. And I thought it was, really good discussion. And we do appreciate the railroad making the trip up here to Richmond. And I personally wouldn't want to be in that position trying to field those questions. You kind of know coming in a group that isn't, you know, looking very favorably at the project. But I think a lot of everyone in the audience, so I think, was very respectful, had a lot of good questions, concerns expressed, and I thought it was a productive meeting.
I think it was unfortunate that the representative they sent knew so little. So it kind of goes back to the railroaded comment of, I mean, there's some of the questions he really didn't care to answer. He just absolutely ignored them and made notes on his papers. It just was disappointing to see a business who was trying to portray that they're working with a community, just absolutely being very smug about it. Anybody else? All right, thank you, guys. Item number 9, the communications miscellaneous.
Hang on.
Yep. You bet. I actually have something as well, so
Mayor and
go
City
ahead and run
Council,
with it, Beth.
I have one item. I think there's a photo up here. I wanted to talk a little bit about an award that the City of Richmond received for their comprehensive plan. So really exciting. We applied for the Wisconsin chapter of APA for the Planning and Excellence Award, and we received that last week. Noah went to that, I think it was on the 3rd, last week before, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and so he went to that along with Todd Streeter and Brad from HKGI, and they also did a presentation at that, the meeting, the APA meeting, and so really exciting. I want to say kudos to the community members, because the only reason that we got this award is because of them. So really, really good job.
Great job.
Good.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks.
As you can hear, the firefighters are doing their air consumption testing tonight. They're going to try and do it again next Monday for those who couldn't make it for tonight, but I'll extend the invitation to council members if you want to do that test. It's basically donning full gear, and it'll take you 7 to 15 minutes, depending on your shape, up and down steps, doing other things, and it's basically testing how you did last year, previous years, that type of stuff. But if you guys are interested, let me know.
Well, had I done it last year, I would have done it
But you
again
can
this year.
start that baseline
I
this
just don't have a
year.
benchmark, so.
So if anybody's interested, let me know. I think Mike Darrow had expressed interest last year, so we'll talk with him later this week. Any other communications? All right, closed session for state statute 19.85 1GE, potential litigation which the city might become involved in order to abate a public nuisance at 225 West 5th and TIF number 6 land sale.
Make a motion to go into closed session?
And I'll
A
second that.
motion to any second to go into closed session. Call the roll.
Alderman Zakowski.
Yes.
Volkert.
Yes.
Kittle.
Yes.
Montello.
Yes.
Weinmeier.
Yes.
Very good. We'll take a few-minute break. Yeah, sure. We can start off. Yeah, good.
I bet they were.
The worst time. I was pouring concrete on the outside.
What's that? Couple minute? 5? I don't know.
West Fifth, it's
Market rate.
the VD building.
Wait, it's West Third.
50 a month is what they had.
Must be West Third.
West Third is the VD building.
No. I mean, it's West.
All their presentations. Hey, it's okay to be early. That may have just been a appearance that we were. We don't we don't what they charge for the rent.
Yeah.
But all their presentations to us, they've indicated that
You gotta be here for a
people need to be able. Part of it is just the cost of building that project.
Yeah. He'll stay in and we'll do the
Taping it.
About $8 million construction project.
Yeah, have a seat. You're fine.
They've got to charge $12.50 a month.
We'll
just to
do
make-
TIF 6 and then we'll